One way that makes it easier at the end is to know that you're honoring the wishes of the person who is dying. I mean, that gives a lot of peace. Acknowledging, like I just try to be honest. I mean, it hurts. It's a muddy road we have to go through. There's really no way around. But not talking about it doesn't help us get through it.
Hey y'all, this is Kosta, and today I'm here with my guest, Kimberly Best, owner of Best Conflict Solutions, focusing on collaborative problem solving in healthcare, small business mediation and conflict management, organizational conflict, elder mediation, family and relationship mediation. Kim is a Tennessee Rule 31 listed civil mediator and a Tennessee Rule 31 trained family mediator and author of How to Live Forever, a guide to writing the final chapter of your life story. Today we're talking about end-of-life planning, how to approach the unapproachable conversations, and the most impactful tools to ensure your legacy is preserved forever. Welcome to the show, Kim. Thank you so much for joining us. I want to talk about your book, How to Live Forever. What inspired you to write this, and what are the main objectives of the book?
Well, first, thank you for having me, and thank you all for listening. It's a pretty interesting story. I was building my career as a conflict manager and mediator, and happened to take a course in how to write a presentation or a book with John Trent, who is a psychologist and author. And he took a small group of us on, and I never meant to be an author of a book, but I was determined to finish what I started. That was my initial thoughts. But what struck me and surprised me is the book started flowing. And it came from, I've been a registered nurse since 1980. I have experience in every intensive care, trauma, and ultimately the emergency department. And I am a passionate believer in we only have now because tomorrow's not guaranteed. And watching the decisions that have to be made around end of life, watching them not be made, watching the fractured relationships that go into that stage. The book just came together to talk about how to finish well. And I want to say really quickly that the reason for the story is the very first person I saw die, 19-year-old nurse, and I'm sitting at the bedside of someone, and for some reason I just pictured like just bookends closing, like I saw her story, and I wondered about, what she loved, what she didn't love. I just wondered, no family was there. And every time since then in the rest of my career, when I saw the end of someone's life, I saw that as a story. So our story is our legacy, right? And we're writing it and we're purposeful about it, but very often we're not purposeful about the ending.
When you talk to healthcare professionals or just everyday people that have read your book, what type of feedback do you get from them?
Well, I give some anecdotals in there. I tell some people's stories. So I get people who cry.
Yeah,
There's some touching stories, but mostly I didn't know. The legal section, having wills and advance directives, people know the will part. Most people have a will, but the other parts of the necessary requirements, I include a checklist of things that you should have in order so your family can take care of things like your passwords and what happens with your pets and just a lot of things like that.
Yeah.
But I think the whole concept of my life is a story and I'm writing it, talking about the unmentionable, death and dying, and trying to turn it into a conversation. I get actually gratitude back. I get people who actually answer it and say, it was hard, but I'm so glad I did it.
Yeah, absolutely. And so in your experience, what is the most overlooked part of end-of-life planning? But I want to add just one little thing to that.
Okay.
Why do you think people are so scared about having these conversations?
Yeah, so my answer is going to be kind of both of them. The hardest part about it is admitting we're going to die. And I think I say that it's the final taboo subject, the final thing. I mean, we'll talk about anything, but it's around fear. that we don't talk about it, right? But we are going to die. And other societies, who deal with death more often can be more open to it than ours. I think we have this story we tell ourselves that is, it's not supposed to happen to me. And it does happen. It happens at any age, and it's part of life. So I feel like it's one of those things that if we bring it to light, it'll lose some of the fear and shame. If we start talking about it, we can accept it, plan for it, and even treasure the life we have now, knowing that it is finite.
When you talk to family members that are having these conversations about their loved ones passing away, how do you sort of ease some of their anxieties and fears? Not necessarily the person who is at risk of dying, but the people around them who honestly don't want to lose them.
Yeah. So it's so fair to mention that it's not without loss and it's not without pain. And losing hurts, I mean, for sure. I think that's, well, it brings to mind a woman that I met a few months ago. She's end-stage disease. She said to me, "This is my last year to live." And it's actually harder on my family than it is on me. And, it just is. I've lost people who are still in my heart and still in my mind, but that is the way life goes. So I think one way that makes it easier at the end is to know that you're honoring the wishes of the person who is dying. I mean, that gives a lot of peace. Acknowledging, like I just try to be honest. I mean, it hurts. It's a muddy road we have to go through. There's really no way around. But not talking about it doesn't help us get through it.
I can't imagine. I'm assuming that's the component of elder mediation that you do. And I can't imagine sitting in a room discussing someone's end of life. Because I'll be honest with you, I have some individuals that we care for who say, when you talk to them, similar to what you said about this is our last year, they say, like, I'm ready. I'm ready to go. And during the pandemic, that was kind of a common theme because, we were talking about reducing the transmission of COVID, and all of these safety measures. And a lot of the people that we cared for, they didn't have those concerns. They said, I'm ready. And I mean, granted, they're 90 years old,
Correct.
Late 80s and 90s. But they're, and I almost, I got to be honest, and I hope this doesn't get me in trouble or anything, but I almost felt like maybe they are ready. Maybe we're overcomplicating their life for
Correct.
our own personal needs. So do you run into those types of environments where you're sitting in your office and you want to say that, but can you say that? Is that something that
I do?
Okay.
I mean, you have to build a rapport with people first, but it's more comes across as a question, what makes this hard? And it always comes down to fear of losing that person, imagining life without them. And I say, that leaves a hole. It will leave a hole in your life that will be filled some other way. But avoiding it isn't going to make it not happen. I want to touch a little bit on what you said about the COVID thing and people being 90. I wrote something at that time that went pretty viral on Facebook.
Oh, wow.
But I expected to get a lot of pushback from it because I wrote on the irony of having a dying population, people who are in nursing homes, and keeping them from their families. And even if you're in some kind of assisted living care or, full care, whatever it is, you're probably your family's probably helping with the caregiving. They're probably depending on you, not to mention the loneliness factor. So the one thing around healthcare that my book is huge on is quality of life. And we make a mistake. Like, we want older people and infirm people to be safe at all costs. And we, as young people, value autonomy over safety. Well, the truth is, so do the older people. The AARP did lots of polls. They want autonomy, the right to live their life the way they want over safety, because we are going to fall apart. We are going to fall and break things. It's all horrible part of the aging process. But to bubble wrap people and keep them from what is joyful for them, to me, was cruel.
So how do you, and I'm not going to get super complex since, this is for the customer, but I am curious your opinion on nursing homes go to great lengths. I mean, just absolutely great lengths to reduce the liability of caring for somebody, And so like you were saying, bubble wrapping somebody. And I'll be honest with you, I was talking to someone, since we're both from Tennessee, our Medicaid agency, someone higher up in our Medicaid agency here called TennCare, and they said we need to get away from healthcare being about compliance and mitigating risk. So why do you think that we are still focusing on those two factors in 2022, soon to be 23, as opposed to focusing on why not just let an individual live their life the way that they want? And if, just like if I were to decide that I'm going to smoke 4 packs of cigarettes and drink a case of beer every day, then it's going to have a negative effect on me. Why can't somebody that's 85 do the same thing?
Oh, what a question. Yeah, it's we've backed ourselves into a corner with litigation and letting systems be responsible for our decisions. And actually, a big part of that is not accepting that, pardon my French, shit happens. Things are going to go sideways in life. Right. And that's part of life. So in expecting a level of service, of care, of responsiveness, we don't leave the natural margin for error, because there is. Like, there are things that are done that shouldn't occur, and there are things that are done because they're going to happen. And we haven't discerned those. And part of that is not accepting death, right? But we can't accept that there isn't a cure for this thing. So one of the things I say is, your death is not a failure of the medical system. It's not a punishment for eating too much bacon or for something you did, it just is. And so people sue because they think there's this perfect standard. And in whether it's in any of our systems, our education system, our healthcare system, we have to make room for a reasonable error, because we all are that.
It's a good point. As a professional conflict mediator that focuses on conflict coaching, family, and elder care mediation, what do families need to prepare for in their personal relationships as family members age?
Yeah, great question. So I think in all of our lives as families, the hardest thing is change. And my family's going through some changes right now, and I think it's so ironic to watch the struggle, even knowing that, to see the struggle. I think keeping in mind that the changes will happen, they can't be predicted. I think getting help along the way when you need it. I think making as many moments matter. So valuing the relationship over the political party. I think
it's a good
the
point.
thing I learned from watching so many people, being with so many people when they died, is this is all we have now. Like, tomorrow's not guaranteed for any of us. I have never met someone who came into the emergency department that had that on their plan in the morning when they woke up. So I think just being aware, and again, that's being aware of death that helps you live better, I think.
Does it help to just slow down and kind of smell the roses? And is that kind of in an essence what you're doing through these mediation sessions, is you're trying to get somebody to just slow down and have like a real intelligent conversation about what comes next?
I like the concept of slowing down. I think you're right, our minds race and we all tell ourselves a story. And if slowing down is a great way to mitigate for that conflict talk going in our head, but it's also some reality testing. Is the
Okay.
story I'm telling myself actual, or is it coming from a place of fear,
Sure.
which is very often the case. So I think making a safe space to have difficult conversations, and that means it's not about blame, and you won't be judged, because most of the time everybody else is struggling with the same thing. We just haven't been vulnerable enough to have the conversations.
If you could you maybe go or give us an example about what a typical conversation is like between a son or daughter and their mother and father, and what kind of impactful tools and methods you use to help the
Hmm.
conversation go into a positive direction?
Yeah, so most of the time the conversations are probably between siblings and other
Oh,
family
wow. Okay.
members.
Nice.
And when you have these really, well, one of my clients said, now I'm literally making decisions for someone else about life and death.
Hmm.
When you have these long histories, and this can be with your parents and a child as well, you have a long history, and that dynamic has changed. It isn't what it was when you were 5. It sort of flip flops. I think it's kind of a circle how we go from needing care to giving care. Just a full circle that keeps
Sure.
repeating. So again, it's making it safe for everything to be on the table, and that is everything. And designing something to move forward. It's like you can't do a whole lot about what's happened, but you can design the future that you want. And people get a lot of hope and relief in that. What happened before definitely matters, and it shaped us now, but we still have the capacity and the free will and the heart to change what the future looks like.
When you talk to these families, do most of them have kind of an end of life plan? Do they at least have like a retirement
Mm.
type of long term care planning and of those types of elements uh, in their plan?
A lot of times, what they have is the typical will and the legal papers, maybe an
Okay.
advance directive that doesn't include details. What happens if I can't eat? If I
Hmm.
should need a feeding tube, not the details. And then I think the one thing I like about my book is that it recognizes your life as a story, leaving your life as a story, leaving your
Hmm.
legacy as an actual story. And I'm going to do a shout out because there's an app called, oh gosh, I thought I wrote it down, Storyworth,
Okay.
that is something
Nice.
you can gift. It's incredible, and you can ask questions of your family member, and they can record those, and then they make it into a
Really?
hardbound book. It is the coolest thing to gift. It's
Wow.
not expensive. It's something that will connect people around these stories, and it's something you have forever to pass on for generations.
I have a reminder for next week, actually. My grandfather is 83,
Uh,
84. So he was born in Russia. So was
oh
I.
wow.
And he moved to the United States in 1992. I moved in 1994. And I have been meaning to sit down and talk to him about his life and
Mm,
everything that he's sort of went through. So we left Russia as Jewish refugees after the fall of the Soviet Union, after a significant rise in anti-Semitism.
mm,
And so there was Jewish community centers that kind of helped give visas through a lottery to individuals, and it was either San Francisco, Atlanta, or New York that had the predominant areas. And so we moved to Atlanta. But I'll tell you, that is, thank you. I know it's kind of off topic in terms of, but maybe not. It's, thank you very much for sharing that. That's actually extremely useful for me personally.
it's very cool.
Yeah, I love that. And it's called
Yeah.
Storyworth.
Storyworth, yeah, you do
Nice,
it online. I mean, it's fantastic. You can
nice.
add pictures even, so that even makes it cooler.
So, can I ask just a poignant question? I mean, what is your opinion of the healthcare industry? And if you may, can you iron down maybe to the long-term care industry? What's your opinion on the long-term care industry?
Is there anything in particular on that? Because that's a very big question.
I mean, it is. And let me ask it a different way. Hold on. What's your opinion, if I may, and ask you kind of a poignant question, what's your opinion on our healthcare industry as a whole when it comes to the United States? Do you think that we're doing a good job of helping our elderly parents live the best years of their life when they turn 65? Is that a better question?
Yeah, no, that's a big question. Well, first of all, the best answer to that is there is an amazing book by Atul Gawande called Being Mortal. And he breaks down, the guy's a genius. It's a fascinating read. I think I've read it. I don't repeat books. I think I've read this 4 times. It talks about our healthcare system and how it got to where we are now, like expecting a healthcare system to walk an older person through their end of life, which is different from most societies, that person is still a member of the family. So it's something else we've given over to a system that can't possibly have enough people to manage that the way that we would like it to be. The problems are the same as they were when I first started nursing. I'm a big fan and I'm a believer that most people who aren't in medicine don't know how hard we work.
Absolutely.
And it's not like it's not like a car garage where if something's broken, you drive through, we know what to tweak. Everybody's different. So what works for this person doesn't work for this person. And it's just hard work. So I believe that the system is doing the best it can. I also believe in personal responsibility, and I believe that we as individuals have to do what we can to take care of ourselves. I mean, we're in a society now where it's kind of like I can do whatever I want and they'll fix me. Well, that doesn't even sound good, let alone be possible.
I mean, why do you think that we don't take the responsibility of caring for our parents? Because when I think of solutions to a lot of the issues that we face in the healthcare system, and I do work with a lot of patients being in long-term care that are end of life, and I always wonder to myself, what would it take for, instead of getting so much feedback from relatives and conservators and powers of attorney, what would it take for them to take on the responsibility of caring for that individual and let us provide intermittent care? Or, there's a lot of places in the world that don't even have that, so.
Right. That's a great point. Well, we're going 190 miles an hour.
Right.
Caregiving is hard. It is a big commitment. And the beautiful thing that you said is that if we could include the opportunity for intermittent care and respite, we could probably have something there. But our system, our expectation is now around that's the medical system's job. Well, it shouldn't be. I mean, they say it's a consumer-driven thing, right? But it's just a mistake that happened. And I still think the problem with the medical system is they err on the side of living. I think that's cost us all, and part of it is the myth of recovery. It's hard. You're constantly walking a fine line between hope and regret, when you're making decisions about care and end of life.
I have so many questions that I can ask you right now, but I have to keep it to only a handful, or we'll be here for 10 hours. Err on the side of living. What does that mean? Describe that.
Well, if you don't have a advance directive, or your family members don't know what you want, or you can't reach family members, because of the legal things that you talked about, the liability, the medical system is going to resuscitate your 90-year-old grandmother who comes in with her heart stopped, because they have to, because Otherwise, there's a potential for, well, we still wanted her to live. And that again is the conversations around expectations. There's living with your heart beating, but being miserable. And sometimes we make those decisions, and I've seen those patients, we're torturing them. I mean, we don't have time for me to tell a day about a time in the intensive care where I literally fell apart because a family finally realized that they were torturing their loved one to try to keep them together. It makes me want to cry now. I mean, I just almost collapsed because day after day, we're taking care of people who deserve because they've worked hard their whole lives, they've raised their families, they deserve to go out in a way that is as pain-free, as much
peaceful
dignity, and as much their choice. But we have to have those conversations so we know what their choice is.
Do you think that there's a financial incentive behind keeping them alive?
There are folks that say that. I am one of those sort of naive people who, that's somewhere I don't go.
Sure.
It could be. The older I get, and I'm not young, the more kind of appalled I can be about how money dictates things. But for me, that's too hard to bear, to go into that. I mean, helping people get to where they have to go, that I can do. But if the big systems are, corrupt or money driven, I think to some degree, there's no doubt.
It would be untenable to think, and we're about to get back to the show. We just went down a rabbit hole. I apologize. It's untenable to think that our healthcare system is completely run by major insurance conglomerates, and they set the directives of how people should be cared for.
That is true, and perhaps the drug industry too, but those boots on the ground people, the doctors and nurses that are taking the abuse, they're not motivated by the money.
I agree with that. I agree with that 100%. And they are maybe the last line of defense against what I would consider administration.
Yeah. No, that's true.
All right, so back to it. How early should you start making these plans? Who needs to be involved? And how do you confirm and solidify these types of agreements?
So all the stakeholders, I think, should have at least some say or at least know what the plan is. And by plan, I mean in detail, as much detail as possible. How early? The truth is you don't have to be old to die. So I know someone who died young of a cancer. By young, I mean very young. She had a young child. And the whole time that she was dying, her family told her she wasn't dying, that she couldn't die, that she, and so I think about this lady who went out without even being acknowledged where she is. So I think, sometimes we don't have time to prepare because, things happen to younger. But if we've prepared with other people, we'll understand the whole process more. So I don't think there's too young of a time. Obviously, you don't want to have this discussion with your children. But I want to add that if you do know somebody who's dying, to be honest with your child about it. Yeah, this is a hard part of life. We're going to miss this person. And, there's a lot of questions that come with that. Some of the stuff we don't know the answer to. We say, well, we don't know. We just have faith that. But not sweeping it under the rug and being honest about it that's a conversation that's helpful to start shining light on.
How many meetings do you typically go through before you can, get to the end of these agreements being, solidified and everybody being on the same page?
Great question. So a mediator's favorite answer is it depends. And literally it depends on how much conflict history that family has. So the better their communication, people who can communicate really well and are talking, they probably don't need to hire somebody like me because they have the skills to work through conflict. Now, on the bright side, if you're struggling with it, we all do. Like almost no one has learned the skills to deal with conflict. So sometimes people are just giving up and throwing up their hands and saying, do what you want, which isn't a very peaceful way to go either. So I think, you learn a lot about handling conflict better when you go through the process. So, I've had people who, come to agreement pretty quickly, and I have people that I'm literally working with for months. I have walked people through the whole process, good people through the whole process. And I talk about my favorite story of a gentleman who was a football player, and he came in with a disease because of probably head trauma where he would become progressively paralyzed. And he came in and he said, I have this diagnosis. I know I'm going to die. I'm just going to sit here and wait to die. And I said, well, that's an option. You can do that. But my dad had the same kind of thing, and he decided he was just going to quit, and he lived 10 more years. So just maybe think about that you're modeling this for your children, that you maybe have more time. And we walked through the whole process, and every time there was big decisions making, we had the family together. Finally, it came time for hospice. And we did the StoryWorth. We did the whole process, that the book lays out. And when it came time for hospice, they made their choice, and he cracked a terrible joke, and the family laughed. And I walked out of their house stunned, because who laughs when it's time for hospice? But somebody who is ready, And she said, I don't know why. They were married like almost 50 years. I don't know why I didn't grieve so much. I do, because she was ready. She grieved along the way, but she was prepared. It's just beautiful.
Before we wrap up, I want to ask you how you started Best Conflict Solutions. And also, I know we talked a little bit about elder mediation as a service that you provide, but how you picked that as one of your specialty services.
That picked me. and that picked me. Yeah, I started Best Conflict Solutions after a really bad divorce, and recognizing that there was a better way, a less painful way. The litigation process makes people enemies.
Yeah.
And mediation helps bring people together, because we sit down and have the conversations that are difficult. So with or without attorneys, I prefer, if you can start the process, the earlier you start it, the earlier it is to go through, figuring out how to make things better. But even with attorneys, that's possible. The reason that when I first took my first mediation course at Hofstra University, someone said to me, oh, you're a nurse, you'd be great for elder care. And I was like, well, okay. And then it just kind of morphed into that, largely because of my nursing. And, when I walked my dad through end of life, he lived with me for 10 years. And during the divorce, I had to move him into somewhere else. And, that move contributed to his rapid decline, which is something I have to live with. I know that was all I could do in that moment, right? But I think just the fierce belief is like every moment matters, I want to be able to help people have that along the way. So that's why I stay with elder.
Absolutely. And you truly believe that elder mediation is a crucial and essential part with the long-term care and end-of-life planning.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I believe mediation is essential for handling any kind of conflict where we need a third party to help us see and untangle the two sides and see and help get to the middle. I say everybody needs a muse. We all need someone who can get us through that.
I talk to so many people, and I always tell them, I say, I just wish they would have taught us conflict resolution skills in high school or something.
Correct.
And it's a shame that we go through our entire life and
that is correct.
We don't know how to talk through conflict.
I talk on conflict as much as I can for just that reason, and I'm torn. Like I feel a pull to start trying to find ways. There are some schools teach peer mediation, which you learn a lot about conflict through that. Our future, our children are our best hope. So anytime around conflict or conflict teaching, you want to talk to somebody, please reach out to me. I'm pretty passionate about that.
So another poignant question before we finish. How do you think we're doing in terms of raising our children to be better at handling conflict?
Well, I think if we don't know how to do it, we can't raise our children how to do it.
Good point.
And
Very good
and
point.
I want to add that when I talk on conflict, I say, so think about when you were a child and you were the source of conflict. What happened? And those are the tools that we learn for handling conflict. They're one of many areas. Of course, we learn it from other places too. We learn about it through power and control and peers and bullies and, all the wrong ways to learn about conflict. But, time out, I believe, it teaches us to reject, right? It teaches us to walk away from people who need us most in conflict.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Spanking, it means if you do something wrong, which I don't know, I tried to be perfect for most of my life, and I just realized I can't. But people are going to make mistakes and bad judgment. It's just what are we doing? What are we doing around teaching that? I'm gonna leave you with this. My
Please.
life lesson. Every year I get a life lesson, and this past year it was. Every moment is an experiment, because it's one we've never been in before. We do not know how to do this moment because we've never been in it before. Now imagine being a child and applying that. Sometimes we will get it right, and sometimes we're just going to make the wrong decision because we don't know what comes next, right? Or for whatever reasons, we can't always know what the outcome's going to be. So if we can grace ourselves with that, okay, I didn't get that right, but it's a learning process and I'll do it better next time. And also do that for other people. Imagine the difference that could make.
Absolutely right. So we always like to end the show with a call to action. What's your best advice for someone entering the long-term care industry as a patient, a caregiver, or an industry professional?
Okay, as a patient, I would say use your voice. You are still in charge. It's your life. Don't let anybody tell you what you should or shouldn't do. As a caregiver, definitely compassion.
Yes.
When I was 16 years old, I started working as a nursing assistant in a nursing home in a little town in Indiana. And I learned words that have stuck with me the rest of my life, particularly in caregiving. And that is, the person training me said, every person is someone's mother, is someone's father, was somebody's child, is someone's brother, sister. Remember the humanity in each of these people.
And an industry professional?
Yeah, the same. I mean, it's just absolutely the same. Just
Awesome.
The compassion, the humanity, and honoring.
Awesome.
We don't know what's best for someone else. I mean, maybe in some brief moments, but the most part, empowering people to make their own decisions.
Absolutely. Kimberly, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. And you've given all of us a lot to think about. And I think you've touched on some really important things, not just for what you do, but for what we do in society as a whole. So for that, we are very grateful.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.